Am I sitting?
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Here we are for another episode of our podcast series on the Bhagavad Gita. We're up to chapter 5 today, so moving along nicely. Welcome, Michael, and let's just launch straight over to you. And what are we in for in chapter 5?
Well, for some more treasures, Jacqui. Each chapter's jewels, aren't they? So anyway, hello to you, Jacqui, and of course, hello to everyone out there listening to these podcasts. Lovely to be joining you again. I'm getting warm to you all behind the screen and loving you and enjoying these sessions very much. So today, Jacqui, we begin our 11th podcast on chapter 5 of the Gita, titled The Yoga of Renunciation. Yeah, renunciation. So we're working through these chapters, all specifically designated for a certain topic, and they're all starting to come together now. So this chapter's titled, I think, as I said, The Yoga of Renunciation. Yoga, reminding everyone again, is simply meaning the path or the way to eventual union. Renunciation, in today's language, it's often referred to as letting go or non-attachment. It's a deeper meaning than, you have to know what you're letting go and why you're letting go. So it has that deeper implication of like totally understanding and then being able to renounce it. But any of those words are accurate in their own way. Sometimes it's been referred to in these teachings as a sacrifice or surrender or giving something up and so on. And people tend to be a bit fearsome of having to surrender something or let something go. But that's only because we don't understand what we're being asked to let go of. But once we realise that what we're wanting to or need to be letting go of is actually like poison to us, it's of no value to us. It holds us back. It makes our lives less satisfactory. So why wouldn't, when you realise what it is, or what those things are, why wouldn't you want to let them go? And once you start, it's like you have a bonfire. First you throw a little bit on and a little bit on and a little bit on, and eventually you're running out with whole armfuls of it and you're chucking it all out. And all of these things, basically, listeners and Jacqui, are all stored in the mind and all stored in our emotional centre. So that's where the big clean out, the big renunciation will take place and needs to take place. All right?
I'm so pleased you clarified that so succinctly and so early on, because even after your first few sentences, I could feel my solar plexus, my whole gut area just start to tighten a little bit. And I mean, this is not new material for me, but still, you saying that renunciation, it's like my body just starts to clench up, like, oh goodness, what do we have to let go of? And you're right, most people, we do become fearful and we worry we're going to have to let go of things that we like and we enjoy and perhaps have a more frugal sort of ascetic path or something like that. So it's so good to hear that initial clarification. And I suspect that not only me, but everybody else is going to be all ears open. Like, what exactly does this mean?
Including my sentiments 35 years ago when I woke up and started. And of course, every student I've dealt with, been in contact with over 30 years of teachings, everyone is faced with it. But to give it just a quick, simple example, and it's nice that you brought it up like that, because again, other people, and that's why I mentioned it's a fearful sort of word or concept for people because we're not used to that. Our society today, particularly in the West, is you can have everything, anything you want, be whatever you want, do whatever you want. And now we're being taught, no, that's not true. You can't do that. I mean, you can, but it's not going to get you very far. And you're not going, certainly not going to get you far on your spiritual development. And it's not even going to get you very far in happiness or satisfaction that everyone's seeking in their daily lives. So I'll just give you a little example. Jewelry, for example, like you as a lady in particular, ladies, like jewelry. If I give you, or your husband gives you a ring, and it looks like a diamond, but you know that it's just a cheap imitation, It doesn't sort of have that sort of value, but it looks pretty, a shiny stone or whatever. We have that notion of everything that glitters, we understand is not gold. So we think, oh, these ideas I've got, or these beliefs I've got, or these opinions I've got, they're gold plated. They're gold, gold, solid gold. But when we start to understand and look at it more closely, as we're doing in these sorts of podcasts and reading sort of the great works, we come to realize that we're being conned. We've been attached and thinking that these little shiny objects are the real thing, but in actual fact, they're just poor imitations. And so what we're learning to do, and eventually will understand, is we'll look through our entity, our mental and emotional aspects in particular, and we'll say, is this really a true diamond, or is it an imitation diamond? And you'll only be wanting by that stage true diamonds. So you'll throw away all the imitations. You'll
My
still be
husband is nervous at this point because I wouldn't mind a nice true diamond. So I'm curious to see where this goes.
And of course, in the world we live in, costumes and you wear stuff, you can't all be wearing $1 million diamond rings or necklaces or something like that. Some people are in a position where they can, but you can still, wear cheapest articles, and they look attractive and they serve the function. But you know that then, the point I'm simply making is, that they're fakes, and they're part of, your attire. But we're looking at this in a much deeper sense, of what's true in us, not what we're wearing as a necklace or earrings or on our rings or on our fingers or something like that. So rest assured, listeners and Jacqui, that there's no hardship in this. Nothing can be taken away from you or from anyone else unless you surrender it, unless you give it up. And there's lots of people, most people on the planet, fighting tooth and nail to hang on to their jewelry, their artificial jewelry or not real jewelry in regards to their minds and their emotions. And God's not going to take it away from you. He says, if you're attracted to those, you love them so much, you want to keep them, well, go ahead. But I touched on karma last week, didn't I, Jacqui? And saying that there's repercussions that go with that. On the other hand, Krishna's teaching Arjuna, us, have a close look. And we're already suspicious because we wouldn't be listening to these podcasts, that there's something artificial in our lives, something not true, something false, and it's not obvious. And so this is the work we're all embarking on, people. And you're doing good work, but it's the craziest paradox that you don't want to give these things up. Your beliefs and expectations. We touched on expectations last week, Jacqui, all that. But once you start realizing clearly that they're not true and that they're holding you back in lots of ways, you will fall over in your rush to start getting rid of them. But, it's going to take years. When I say, it's not going to, tomorrow you just turf out all the untruths that are within you. So it's a long project. But what I'm meaning by that is you'll start getting excited and you'll want to do it. Yeah, and that's the only way anyone can get rid of any of these falsities and misbeliefs and untruths. Is the word that reside in everyone. I can't take yours out. No one could take mine out. I can't take anyone else's out. You can't take anyone else's out. Each person has to come to an understanding. This part of me is not true in my mind or in my emotions, and I don't want it anymore. It's not serving me any useful purpose. In actual fact, it's holding me back, and I don't want to be held back, and I want to lead a happier and a more spiritual life. And when you get to that stage, you'll start be very happy to start denouncing or surrendering or sacrificing or letting go or whatever terms you like. Letting go is just a sort of warm, fuzzy term. There's a book, called Letting Go by David Hawkins. Very popular. Some of our listeners, I'm sure, have read it. Very well written book. He was a very knowledgeable man. But there's a lot to do in letting go. Firstly, you need to know what you're letting go of and why you're letting go and what will happen when you're letting go. So you need all of this knowledge that we've been looking at, plus more, to make all that clear. When the person's strong in their own understanding of all of that concept, this concept of renunciation, they'll embrace it like the greatest lover they've ever had in their life. All right, Jacqui.
Beautiful. Thank you.
So I hope you and the other listeners can relax a little bit now.
I feel confident we collectively are.
So once again, Jacqui, we find our mortal friend Arjuna in a somewhat confused state. And I think we've sort of touched on that a bit already. He's asked for help from his good friend. He's asked for help, and his good friend Krishna, now his spiritual guru, has been giving him plenty of new knowledge to contemplate. So that's what we've been getting over these 10 podcasts so far. He's told him that as a warrior, a man of action, he must act in this world, as we must also. So we must all be acting, and we are. God made it that you have to act. He says, I act in providing this creation and sustaining it. You got to play your role within the creation and act act whichever way you want, but eventually according to my divine laws. So then he gave him new knowledge as to how to act from his higher self according to Krishna's divine laws. That's the Dharma, the laws of the universe. To perform his action selflessly without attachment, free from his egoic desires as a sacrifice to the Lord. Now that's a huge amount of new knowledge for Arjuna and us, Jacqui, to put into practice as to how we act physically, emotionally, mentally during the course of our daily lives. And we've just elaborated on that quite fully, haven't we, in the last 5 minutes, fully in regards to the aspect of renunciation. So in the very first verse of chapter 5, and I'm quoting here directly, Arjuna asks, so he says, my Lord, I've been listening carefully to what you've been teaching me. First, you recommended the path of knowledge, and next you recommended the path of action based on the wisdom of desireless action. He says, I'm confused. I'm a bit confused. Been telling me one lot of things, now you're telling me another lot of things. And in the early stages, that's part of our journey, isn't it? Confusion. It's an important part. It's a vital part, not violent, vital. Because in that confusion, we ask questions like you've been asking throughout these podcasts and like you did just a few minutes ago. And it's that confusion that asks us, because we don't want to be confused, so we want to sort it out. That's how it all works. It's all beautiful. He says, tell me truly, which of these two paths is more conducive to my highest welfare? So he's saying, I want to know clearly what's best for me. I want to become a spiritual person. I want to, go the whole journey. And so a lengthy page here now, Jacqui, of notes of Krishna replying in this early part of the chapter on renunciation as to what Krishna is saying he feels is best for his welfare and best for his development, which is, of course, ours. He says, firstly, that both paths lead to the highest goal. Both paths. Of the two, right action is the better path for you, Arjuna, as it is for most people. Because we're constantly acting in the world. We're acting now doing these podcasts. Tomorrow you'll act and you go to work. Tonight you'll be the mother of your children, or today you'll be having time with your children and be a wife, so a mother and then a wife with your husband. So we play all these different roles. We're constantly acting. And remember, everyone, it's not just acting physically. Most of the action that takes place in a human being is in our minds, the thinking part, and in our hearts, the emotional part. So 1 minute you're sad, next minute you're happy, 1 minute you're crying, next minute you're laughing. All of these emotions can all happen within even 10 minutes or half an hour. Yeah. You're crying and you're upset, someone that you know comes and gives you a big hug, and suddenly you're smiling and all's well with the world again. Yeah, 2 seconds ago, it was hell, and now suddenly everything's sort of all right. So, yeah, but we're looking, of course, at this long term. And so he goes on to say that only the unenlightened speak of wisdom and right action as separate, not the wise. So when you don't understand, like in Arjuna here, confused, he's saying which one's the best. Well, he's telling him they're both the same, but for you as an individual acting and doing a lot of acting, um, right action is the right path for you. But eventually, as I said last podcast, they all these merge together as we understand. Yeah, we're keeping them separate at this stage, everyone, so we can zero in on each topic, action and knowledge and renunciation now, and wisdom, the previous 2 podcasts. But they got to all merge. They're all blending. And I'm sure the listeners that have been with us from the start would be starting to realise that quite clearly. And he goes on to say, right action leads one to wisdom. So there's the first sort of step of joining it all up together. He says, he who perceives that the two are one knows the truth. Those on their spiritual path who have come to understand this overcome the world of duality, the two opposites. So we all understand hot and cold, kind and unkind, generous and miserly. These are the world of opposites that we're constantly dealing with that appear in our daily lives one way or another. Yeah. Um, Jealousy and non-jealousy, and patience and impatience, tolerance and intolerance, kind, unkind. This is the world of duality. Everything's got an opposite. Truth even has got an opposite, untruth. So most of us have been operating to a large extent untruthfully in our lives. What we're ascertaining now is how to gain more truth and push aside the untruths. So that's the major concept of renunciation. What you're letting go is not your husband, not your children, not your job, not your house, not your car, none of those things. What you're letting go is anything inside me that is not true. And at the start, it's a bit hard to realize because the ego disguises itself, and you got to look, you got to know what you're looking for. And your example you shared last week when you said how you hear a soft voice, and then instantly a loud voice crowds it out, doesn't it? Shouts it out. Yeah. No, don't say that. What you're going to say. No, don't do that. What you're going to do. Well, that's your higher self, your buddhi, that whispers, that never shouts. It always just whispers. So that's why you've got to be still to hear it. It's talking to every person on the planet, all 8 billion. But because there's so much noise in their minds and so much agitation and movement in their hearts, they can't hear the silent voice. So all they hear is the egoic, untrue voice saying, do this and don't do that, and say this and don't say that, and like this and don't like that, all of those things. Yeah, understanding clearly, Jacqui?
It's beautiful. I'm just thinking of the times I've shared meditation groups with students in the past, and often they'll report that in those, like for true beginners, in those early weeks where they're just starting to sit quietly and let the voice and the chitter chatter soften, it's not uncommon for people to have realizations of, oh, something else is going on in here. And they're often so wide-eyed when they come to you to sort of check, is that normal? Like you can actually pause and momentarily find a little bit of stillness and actually hear or observe or notice that something else is at play in this whole mind-body continuum. It's often for people that are just new sort of initiates on the path or new explorers in this way, it's quite shocking and confronting for them. They're part bewildered, part confused, part excited, part wanting to check, is it all okay? Is that normal? So
Surprised.
yes, it's
Does
very,
this actually happen?
very beautiful, but I'm so aware that for the beginner's mind and the beginner's experience, it is new territory when you start to really integrate and understand and touch upon in a real life way, not a mental thought form or a mental construct, when you start to really notice inwardly and deeply what's going on. Very
Well,
beautiful.
yeah, again, nicely put at this point to help explain it or enlarge it to the rest of the listeners. The next chapter is on meditation. So Krishna doesn't teach meditation or suggest meditation to Arjuna up to this point. because he hasn't got enough knowledge. So he's like the people you're describing. And because they haven't got a still mind and emotions, and because they haven't let go, they're still fully driven by desires, and they haven't gone through this letting go process, you can't be in a position to meditate. Now, people can, do start meditating and pick up the other bits later on as they go, but Krishna's technique and the great masters, current teachers of the Gita and so on, follow the recommendations as well. But that's what's coming up in a couple of podcasts, 2 podcasts on meditation, where I'll go through it in detail. And for people who haven't meditated before or early stages, they'll get some information that'll solidify and explain a bit more clearly what meditation, what a big meditation, just quickly, is often referred to as the master key. Yeah, that's how important it's seen. It opens up, unlocks everything, because all this knowledge and trying to do the right action and stuff like that, if there isn't an overriding umbrella, and I'll show a diagram on that, Jacqui, of meditation, of stillness, so that these other topics operate underneath it, they're not at their peak. So when we introduce stillness to all of this as an overlying, as I say, umbrella, embracing the knowledge, the wisdom, the right action, and the letting go, it becomes more clear and more purposeful and so on. But that's the design of the Gita, and that's the first 6 chapters, which is dealing with the mortal aspect, Arjuna, you, me, and so on, and of course our listeners. So I'll continue on, Jacqui. So once the people have realised the opposites, they're starting to overcome the senses and escape from the bondage of their egoic self-will, and they become, in that sense, free of karma. He says they're realising that what's being asked of us is to renounce our ego, our self-will, which causes our separateness and becomes our main obstacle to spiritual development. So I touched on that when I referred to your example you shared last week with the voices. They're realizing that what's asked of us is to remove that ego, which is constantly there, interfering in our lives. It's like having a Buddhi, shown as often an angel in pictures, talking, whispering in your ear, and the ego here with its pitchfork, like a little devil, and it's shouting and trying to get your attention. Like a spoiled child doing tantrum or whatever to get attention so it can get what it's want. Well, the ego is exactly the same. We've loved our egos, folks. You've loved it for many, many lifetimes. You've trusted it. It's told you it's your best friend. It's told you, listen to me. I know what's best for you. You just always follow my advice. But in this lifetime, if you're listening to these podcasts, you're starting to get a bit suspicious of that voice that you're constantly hearing. And you're saying, I'd like to hear another voice for a change, and just sort of see if I can compare the two and how it makes some sense to me. That's all making sense, Jacqui, isn't it?
Yeah, very, very much so.
Yeah. Okay, so having direct experience of selfless action, they realise that this is much better than being entangled in worldly desires. As one's mind is focused on the divine, even whilst engaging in earthly activities, it gradually purifies, eventually leading to the higher self. So this is a process, all gradual, all step by step. The terms that are often used in the great works, Jacqui, spiritual works, describing these sorts of people, operating at these various levels of understanding and how they live, are these terms, which I'll read out now. Firstly, there's the term yogi, which I've covered in podcasts, but just quickly, it's the active seeker. It's an example, people like us, we're starting now to seek the truth, or have been seeking it for a while and want more strongly to continue it. Then there's the sannyasins. They're what's called the true renunciates. Now, in the truest picture, they're the ones that are depicted in picture form as wearing a loincloth, a stick, and a begging bowl. they've given up everything to do with the world and just renounce everything. No clothes, no houses, no food, no nothing, just what anyone gives them. But we don't need to go to that extreme. In other words, and it'd be very futile, because if 8 billion people all going around begging for food, who's going to give them food? So it wouldn't work out very well. So that's just a sort of, if you like, a symbolic example of that mentally and emotionally, we basically have to end up being like that. So all we're getting in our bowl then is just what's presents and dealing with it in the now, as we've already discussed. So the sannyasin is referred to as the ascetic, the renunciate. For example, again, people like us who are now learning to renounce our desire for action, and likewise the result or fruit of such actions. So we're both a yogi and a sannyasin. Yeah, we've been mainly a yogi, getting new knowledge and acting on it. But now we're learning in this chapter renunciation. So we're adopting some of the sannyasinistic tendencies and letting go, as I said a number of occasions now in today's podcast, the mental and emotional treasures that we've been hoarding that really are stale or out of fashion or no use to us. And then he refers to the last group of seekers, and that's the jnani, the enlightened ones. So eventually the yogi turns into a sannyasin, and they become a yogi sannyasin, and then the yogi sannyasin eventually further down the path will become an enlightened being, the jnani. So it's a transition from one state to another. At this stage, where, unless I've got some enlightened listeners listening, which would be very nice of you, and you're just being kind, because you wouldn't be needing to hear anything I've got to say. But I welcome your support. Hey, talking about support, Jacqui, listeners, when we finished our podcast yesterday, my daughter, Jacqui, lovely lady, look at her there, she doesn't know what I'm going to say.
No.
You, told me that because she gets feedback on her Facebook page or something. I don't have any of that technology, so I don't know anything, except some of my old students or current students tell me, that I'm enjoying your podcast. But Jacqui said to me, someone posted on her site, pure gold. And it sort of shocked me a bit. And I couldn't sleep last night, Jacqui, and I'm thinking, is this some sort of modern technology or terminology or something? Could you briefly explain to me what pure gold means?
Well,
No, all right. I think
you think you got it?
I think I've got it. This is silly dad talk, people. So
Okay.
don't hang up. But it was lovely feedback for me, because otherwise I don't know what's going on. But they were pure gold, those words. Pure gold. I love it.
Well, I'm glad you appreciated the words so well. And I mean, I know you're joking, but in the mix of that, it's really lovely to get people's feedback. It's nice to know that our conversations and your teaching and whatever we're doing here each week is appreciated. Like, I don't think people make those comments if they don't mean it. So it's this notion that you and I have care enough about this kind of work that we put aside the time. I mean, you put aside a lot more time in doing the research and presenting the material. We come together, we make this happen, we post it out there in the world. It's nice to know that there are those connections with people happening, and that the information is spreading and sharing, and we're contemplating, and that something else bigger than the two of us coming together each week is in motion. It's a very lovely flow on and ripple effect.
Very nicely put. No, don't worry, I knew fully. But see, one of the things, that I've referred to a couple of times, and you have as well, talking about me, that this is all sort of new to me, listeners. And in 30 years of teaching, it's always been in groups, and I get direct feedback. And that's, for a teacher or whatever, is what motivates you and what keeps you going. If I wasn't getting positive feedback and people weren't sort of appreciating getting the new knowledge and realizing the changes it makes. Well, I wouldn't be doing it. No one would be doing it. So it's not. I don't crave it. Don't misunderstand. But I'm still a human being, and if someone says something nice to me or appreciative or something like that, well, it's sort of in. Like it does to any human being. We like kindness and nice words, and it encourages us and motivates us to sort of keep going. So with this, the only feedback I get back is when you make a comment like you did yesterday, that someone's put in two words, you didn't know them, I didn't know them, um, pure gold. Well, that tells you you could write a book on that, couldn't you? Yeah. So don't listeners, don't all bombard Jackie with a million things saying, "Oh, your dad's lovely and you're lovely" and all the rest of it. A few of you will, and we appreciate it, but that's not the aim. That's I'm sure you all know that that's not what's behind what I'm saying. I'm really saying that. I, I'm delighted that I've got that feedback, and Jackie's delighted because she got that feedback because it's telling us there's someone out there that it's meaning it's making a meaningful difference to them, and they think it's literally pure gold. Yeah. And that's like I was saying earlier on about what we're letting go of. We're letting go of false gold. So this person, if they're now saying that, they're understanding more clearly what real gold is. And all these messages that I'm putting through on the podcast, and I said that right at the beginning, Jackie, the Gita is a massive work. All I can do in these podcasts is just pick out the jewels, the pure gold in these snippets to whet the people's appetites so that they can, so it'll inspire them and they can read the book, get a book. You, well, you wouldn't believe it, Jackie, but my I've got diabetes, and I recently went on insulin a year or so ago, and my diabetes doctor, or whatever you call them, um, was asking me one time what I'm going to be doing in the afternoon. I said, "Oh, I'm going to do a podcast, bloody podcast," and she said, "Oh, what are you doing the podcast on?" And I said, "Oh, my daughter asked me to do them, and I'm doing them on the work called the Gita. I'm sure you haven't heard of that. Not many people have." "Oh, yes," she says, "I've heard of it." Anyway, she asked, could she um, give her the link. So I gave her the link, and she rang me a few weeks later, and that was the week, Jackie, when you held up the book on Jack Hawley's Walk Through for Westerners, the Gita, a very simple book, but a very powerful book. And you recommended it, you bought it, and I endorsed it fully, as I am now. I hope Jack's listening. Send me some of the royalties, Jack. But she rang and she said, "I've listened to the podcast." And she said, "You know how your daughter mentioned that book? Well, I've ordered it. I can't wait till it comes. I want to read it." So there you go, Jackie. This is just, I don't know if I've mentioned that one to you before, but that's how that's the sort of feedback I get as well. It's very heartening. It's lovely. Anyway, I better press on, Jackie.
Yes.
So next Krishna describes to Arjuna these three seekers, the Jnani, the Yogi, and the Sannyasin. So I'll quickly go through those. So firstly, he starts with the Jnani. The enlightened person understands the real I, not I. When people say, "Who are you?" and you say, "Oh, I'm this body and I've got a job and I'm a husband or I'm a wife and I'm pretty famous," and all of that. He says, the enlightened person understands the real I. That's the higher self. There's the small I, or the small self, and the higher I, and the capital S self. He understands that that higher self does nothing at all. It's not the doer. So it's only the mortal that says, "Oh, I'm doing these podcasts, and aren't they good?" And I run this organisation, and I'm a politician, and I rule the country, and all these sorts of things. Everyone's thinking me, the mortal, is doing. Well, it's not true, and I'll elaborate on that in the next couple of lines. But what the higher part of us enlivens the bodily instrument, as it's called, to operate in the worldly or mortal self, through which it sees, hears, breathes, moves about, sleeps, works, lets go, or hangs on, and so on. The jnani, having become one with the Supreme Self, remains perfectly detached from all internal functionings and external activities. So that's describing the realized being. Knows that I don't do anything because without consciousness, I'm just a corpse. And without consciousness, I can't talk. Without consciousness, I can't hear. So consciousness is in everything. And, you know, I'm sure some of our listeners are understanding that to some extent or other, but we need to understand it more fully. And in that sense, you become the observer. So the highest self in you just stands back and watches the instrument, the body and the mind and the emotions operating at whatever level they are. And then it can spot clearly if you're operating from the ego or from the buddhi, your higher self or your lower self, and it can instruct you accordingly because it sees that you're prepared to listen and now listening to that other silent, more silent voice. Is that making sense, Jacqui?
Mm-hmm.
What I'd like to do here is read a quote here from the great Zen master, Huang Po. Beautiful book, but quite difficult to read. But there's a little passage in here that relates to this, and I love it so much. I'd like to share any of these are gems to me, Jacqui, and I like to share them with the students that I deal with, and also students that I can't see behind the screen. He says all the qualities typified by the great masters, Krishna and Jesus and Buddha, and many others, are inherent in men. Every human being has got those same qualities. But if you don't know, they're just lying there dormant, aren't they? Yeah. And he says they're inherent in men and are not separated from the one mind. So it's in us, and if we can tap into it and understand it and use it, we can tap into what's called the one mind, or the mind of God, the universal mind. Lots of different ways of saying it. So he says, awake to it. This is the message that Huang Po is putting out to his disciples or seekers of truth. Awake to it, and it is there. Remember, I quoted that little quote from Kabir last week, and I said, "What are you searching for? I am in. It's in you. Here I am." So this is saying exactly the same thing. It is there. Awake to it. It's there. And you see how they're two different people, two different parts of the world, saying exactly the same thing. This is because tapping into the universal mind, there's only one truth, lots of messengers, but only one truth, one message. He says, awake to it, and it is there. You students of the way who do not wake up, who do not awake to this in your own minds, and who are attached to appearances, or who seek for something objective outside your own minds, have all turned your backs on the way. So this is when you're caught up in all the attachments. Now he's saying you lost your way. You need to renounce all of those. Yeah. And he gives a lovely example describing the holy Ganges, the holy river Ganges. And he talks about the sands. In lots of places there's sandy banks, sandy edges next to the banks. And he says, the Buddha said of the sands of the Ganges, if all the Buddhas and the great masters and the gods walk across them, the sands do not rejoice. And if oxen, sheep, reptiles, and insects tread upon them, the sands are not angered. For jewels and perfumes they have no longing, and for the stinking filth of manure and urine they have no loathing. Powerful words, Jacqui, powerful words, listeners. So what he's simply saying there is, the mortal isn't as good as you think it is. Switch across to the immortal, and then you can differentiate between the world of opposites and understand how everything works. And to do that, you need to have the knowledge, you need to be still, and you need to then become what's called the observer, and you're observing all of that. So when you come across insects and whatever, people are like blowflies at times, or mosquitoes, and giving you bites, you learn to ignore them. And the ones who smother you with perfume and gifts and stuff like that, well, you're also a bit wary of that as well. So but I love the reference where he says all the qualities in the great masters are inherent in men. You're not separate from the one mind, awake to it, and it is there. And this is what I put to you, Jacqui, and all the listeners, is what you all have done and what you're all doing. You've woken up, you've made a decision that this is what the path you want to go down in the remaining years of your life, and you're going to press on with that.
Mm. I can't help but think, I mean, there are so many paths, and you've mentioned that many times over the series, many ways up the mountain, many ways to the truth. But it just makes me reflect on the way in which yoga is accessed in the Western countries, which is a very sort of athletic, physical form of yoga. But as the way in for so many people, I see why the rise of that has been so immensely popular, particularly over the last 10 or 15 years. Because as busy people with busy minds and busy emotions come into a physical yoga class and they do the stretching and the alignment and the moving and the breathing and the focusing and the drawing of the awareness in, I think for people that don't even have a philosophical understanding, with enough repetition of that practice, it brings them into little micro moments of stillness here and there where they touch upon, without having a language or a sort of a mental notion of what's taking place. What they actually end up stumbling across here and there are little moments of stillness where they then they might not have the wording or the true intellectual understanding, but they
Yes.
start to touch upon a stillness or a quietude,
Yeah.
a connection with the higher part of themselves, or sometimes there is this sense of it connects in with a higher universal truth or a higher, bigger picture. And again, people might not have the language for this, but they know the experience when they have it. They know when it's within their body mind sort of alignment, or they know when they feel like it connects with something bigger than themselves out there. So
Yeah.
it's very beautiful. It's no wonder people are drawn to athletic yoga in the West, even though they might not have the philosophical understanding of some of what we're sharing here, but they get to have the beginnings of the experience that probably then awaken them to these kind of teachings.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, what the main part or big part of that quote that I just read out, that it's inherent in every being. So there's a lot of people who aren't maybe studying this or, to the extent that we are in this regard, but they could have done that in the previous life or two. And now they're focusing more on putting it into practice, if you like. So um, most people on the planet, to my understanding or interpretation, observation is would rather do you good than harm. Um, by and large, most people are kind, to each other to some extent or other, or to a large extent. People who have got kids, parents, try their best to look after them and rear them and so on. Society in many parts of the world, particularly in the West, but that's sort of starting to fall apart about. But try and operate according to laws that are in the country, and most people don't want to go rioting and destroying things and burning buildings and stuff like that. But there are certain elements in society that indulge in that for whatever reason. But yeah, inherently, in every being, there's what's called the seed of truth. There's the pure self. But for most people, it's so far hidden, Jacqui, that they don't even know it's there. Many even actually deny it's there. Like an atheist says, no, I haven't got a soul. There's no God. Don't believe any of that. So they're operating at a very base level of just all they know is the mortal aspect, and try and manage their lives. And they can still be successful politicians or authors of books or influencers, on TV or whatever. But they're operating at they might sound intelligent, they might sound like they know what they're talking about, but it's only in a limited mortal world. They've got no idea of a higher realm and the possibility of their mind and emotions and their whole being operating at that higher level, like I just read in that quote. Now, I'd just like to finish off, Jacqui, with the yogi and the sannyasin, so I don't have to, refer to it next week. and I'll finish there. So I've done the Jnani, the enlightened being, but I'd like to tie in this, the yogi and the sannyasin, because that's most of our listeners. So he says these two terms describe the spiritual seekers on their journey to truth, which is us. A yogi, through karma yoga, the path of action, is working on shedding the bulk of his desires. We looked at desires in great detail a few podcasts back. As he continues to renounce them, he gradually becomes a sannyasin. Dedicating all his actions devoid of attachments to the spirit, he performs all actions dispassionately, using all his equipment of body, senses, mind, and emotions as a means of purification. The combination of knowledge, action, wisdom, and renunciation leads him to contemplation and eventually, in the next podcast, meditation, until he finally reaches the state of self-realization, becoming a jnani, an enlightened soul. And I made mention of that before, that first we start off as a yogi, getting the knowledge, then we put in the practice, we get wiser, we've let go, and then eventually it merges into the jnani, the enlightened being. So it's a progressive part of the spiritual journey that each human being needs to go through, just like babies need to crawl first on the floor, and then they pull themselves up and take some hesitant steps and keep falling over, and then they gradually can walk nicely or confidently, and then they start running and skipping and hopping and jumping. So on our spiritual journey, we're the same. We slowly develop, step by step, gradually. All right. So I'll continue on next week with a couple of stories. I'll start off with a couple of stories, Jacqui, that'll sum up what I've talked about today, which will help through the stories simplify this aspect of renunciation and operating both from a mortal and an immortal at the same time. All right.
Beautiful.
So I won't give the exercise this week because I haven't sort of finished what I wanted to make it a meaningful exercise. So you can all have a rest. No, don't have a rest. Keep practicing all the ones that I've suggested so far. All right, Jacqui, we've gone a
Beautiful.
little bit over.
No, that's okay. Rich teachings, and it's nice to keep with the flow. So,
Yeah.
all right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Take care. Enjoy your week, and we look forward to sharing with you again next week. Bye for now.
Okay. Bye, everyone.